far as I know, this is not the case.
Ancient Aliens Live is essentially an experiential add-on to the show Ancient Aliens, with some of your favorite contributors of Ancient Aliens, such as myself.
You should forget about the aliens for a moment, because the real mystery here is the man who has spent his life selling them to you. He has no degree in archaeology and no scientific training, yet he has outlasted every critic and outearned every doubter who lined up against him. The Ancient Aliens guy is not who you think he is, and the truth begins somewhere you would never expect. The man behind the hair today. Let's start with where things stand right now, because this is the part that surprises people the most. If you assumed the Ancient Aliens guy faded away, you assumed wrong. As of this year, the show that made him famous is still running. It has crossed 22 seasons and more than 300 episodes, which makes it one of the longest-running series in the history of cable television. Giorgio A. Tsoukalos is still right there in the middle of it, still asking the same questions, still wearing the same look of total certainty. But the television show is honestly the smallest part of his world now. In recent years, he has been touring the country with a live stage production called Ancient Aliens Live. He stands on theater stages in front of paying crowds, joined by other names from the field, telling stories and answering questions for 90 minutes at a time. Tickets start around $39, and fans can pay extra for a photo experience after the show. He sells personalized video messages online. He even released a signed collectible figurine of himself that costs $350. And then comes the detail that really tells you how far this has gone. A major Hollywood studio is developing a feature film based on Ancient Aliens. The deal was announced a few years ago, a real screenwriter was hired, and producers behind a hit streaming series came on board. Think about that for a second. The man the internet turned into a punchline now has a movie in development with his name attached to the concept. His personal life, by contrast, stays remarkably quiet. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife, a glass artist named Crix Beeble. She makes handcrafted jewelry, and if you look closely at the show, you can sometimes spot him wearing her pieces on camera. He almost never talks about family beyond that. For a man whose public image is so loud and so colorful, the private version of him is kept firmly behind a closed door. So that is the picture today. A long-running show and a comfortable life, built on a subject that universities openly mock. It looks like the story of a man who won, and in many ways, it is. But a victory like this does not appear out of nowhere, and that phrase matters here because it is exactly the kind of phrase he loves to use. Nothing simply appears fully formed. There is always a path that leads to it. His path did not begin with aliens at all. It did not begin with television, or memes, or sold-out theaters. It began with a quiet boy in the mountains of Switzerland, a strict boarding school, and a single book that his grandmother placed into his hands. To understand how he became the most recognizable believer on the planet, you have to go back to the beginning. And the beginning is far stranger and far more ordinary than you might expect. The boarding school and the book. Giorgio A. Tsoukalos was born on the 14th of March in 1978 in the Swiss city of Lucerne. His background was a genuine mix. His father came from Greece and his mother came from Austria, so he grew up between worlds. His childhood moved between the order and quiet of Switzerland, summers spent on the Greek islands, and winters in Austria. He went to an international boarding school tucked into the Swiss Alps, the kind of place built around discipline and routine. He grew up speaking several languages fluently, which is something most people never learn about him. That detail matters more than it seems. A boy who moves between 3 countries and speaks several languages learns something early, which is how to read a room and adjust himself to whoever is in front of him. He was being trained as a communicator long before he ever knew it. His grandmother gave him a book. It was Chariots of the Gods, written by a Swiss author named Erich von Däniken. That book is the foundation of the entire ancient astronaut idea, the claim that visitors from space influenced ancient cultures. It was a wildly unusual gift for a young boy. Most grandmothers hand down recipes or stories. His handed him a world view. He read it, and something in his mind clicked into place. When he picked it up again years later as a young adult, he described the feeling like running into an old friend. That book did not just interest him, it quietly set the direction of his whole life. Now, the story takes a turn that most people get wrong. You might assume a man who built a career on ancient mysteries must have studied archaeology or history. He did not. He went to Ithaca College in New York and earned a degree in sports communication. He graduated young, around the age of 20. He was not learning to read ancient writing or excavate ruins. He was learning how to cover athletic events, how to tell a story to an audience, and how to hold attention. And honestly, that is the most important thing to understand about him. He has openly said he is thankful he does not have a degree in archaeology, because in his mind, that would have boxed him in. He did not want to think like a scholar. He wanted to think like a communicator. While others were studying the rules of a field, he was studying how to make people listen. That single choice shaped everything that came after. It is worth pausing on how unusual that is. Most people who challenge mainstream science try to build credentials first, hoping the letters after their name will earn them respect. Tsoukalos did the opposite. He decided that the stage, the camera, and the audience were the real source of authority. He bet that if enough people watched him speak with confidence, the watching itself would become the proof. It was a risky bet, and it would take years to pay off. Think about what that kind of confidence actually requires. He was choosing to stand in front of trained experts with none of their training, and to do it without ever flinching. Most people could never carry that weight. He treated it as his entire advantage.
Giorgio, he's an icon in ancient astronaut theory.
But before any of that could happen, before the television fame and the memes, he needed money, structure, and a way to learn how spectacle actually works. He found all three in a world that could not seem further from ancient ruins and flying saucers. He found it under the bright lights of professional bodybuilding stages, and that chapter of his life is one that almost nobody ever talks about. The bodybuilding years nobody talks about. For roughly a decade, starting in the late 1990s, Giorgio Tsoukalos lived a double life, and the side most people have never heard about was bodybuilding. This was not a casual hobby squeezed in around other work. This was his actual career, the thing that paid his bills and filled his calendar. It is a strange fact to sit with, because nothing about the man you see on television today hints that this is where he came from. He was not a competitor standing on stage flexing. He worked the other side of the curtain. He organized events. He promoted athletes. He handled publicity. He volunteered at major contests and learned the business from the inside out. Eventually, he became the lead promoter and contest director of one of the bigger professional shows on the West Coast, an event in San Francisco that ran year after year in the early 2000s. He was the one making sure the lights hit at the right moment, the crowd stayed excited, and every athlete got their spotlight. We want you to really sit with this, because it is the key that unlocks the whole story. A bodybuilding show is not about muscles alone. It is about presentation. It is about turning something into an event that people will pay real money to attend. It runs on posters, on staging, on dramatic introductions, on autograph lines, on photo opportunities, and on the feeling that you were in the room when something mattered. Tsoukalos spent years mastering that exact machine. He learned how to package a person and sell an experience. He kept this going while quietly working on his real obsession at the same time. He was juggling contest schedules and athlete promotions with one hand while building the foundations of his ancient astronaut work with the other. Most people would struggle to manage even one of those worlds. He ran both at once for years, and the skills slowly bled together. The promoter and the believer were becoming the same person, and neither side could be separated from the other anymore. There is a small but telling detail from this period. A journalism student once visited his home to interview him. The student later described the living room, and it was almost perfectly split in two. One side was decorated with reproductions of Egyptian and African artifacts, with globes and maps, and the look of ancient history. The other side was covered in posters of muscular athletes, souvenirs from his life as a bodybuilding promoter. That room was the man himself, laid out on two walls. Ancient mysteries sat on one side. Showmanship and spectacle sat on the other. He was already merging them, probably without even realizing it. And that is the fresh way to understand his entire career. Most people frame him as a believer who simply got lucky with a meme. I think the truth is sharper than that. He is a promoter first and a believer second, or maybe a promoter and a believer at the exact same time, with no clear line between the two. Everything he built later, every convention, every tour, and every photo package is the bodybuilding playbook scaled up and pointed at a brand new subject. The athletes were just in the practice run. The structure was the real lesson. Once he understood how to make a crowd care, how to make an event feel essential, and how to turn attention into income, he had everything he needed. All that was missing was the right product to sell and the right partner to open the right doors. The product was already sitting in his mind, planted there by a book years earlier. The partner was the man who wrote that book, and getting close to him would change the size of everything. Building the alien empire. The turning point came when Giorgio Tsoukalos stopped being a fan of the ancient astronaut idea and became its organizer. While still in his 20s, he co-founded a magazine called Legendary Times. This was not a general history publication trying to cover a little of everything. It was built around one specific idea, the claim that extraterrestrials influenced ancient civilizations. He was the owner, the editor, and the public face of it all. He did not wait for a major publisher or for academic approval. He simply built the platform himself and put himself at the center of it. That magazine did something important. It made him a hub. He was no longer one voice among many. He was the person who gathered the voices together. The biggest names in the field began appearing in his pages, including authors who had spent decades pushing these theories. Most importantly, he formed a direct partnership with Erich von Däniken himself, the very author whose book his grandmother had given him as a child. He became von Däniken's official representative across the English-speaking world and helped run an organization dedicated to the research. The boy who read the book was now standing beside the man who wrote it. With that foundation in place, he moved toward television, and again, his instincts were sharp. His earliest screen appearances were small. He showed up in documentaries and on cable programs, sometimes introduced in ways that suggested more authority than his actual background supported. Those early spots were tests. There were chances to see whether audiences would take him seriously, whether his energy translated through a screen. They did. Producers noticed that he was watchable. He spoke with conviction. He never seemed bored by his own ideas. Then came the moment everything pivoted around. A cable network launched a program built entirely on this subject, and Tsoukalos became its defining face. The show asked enormous questions. What if ancient monuments were built with help from above? What if the old stories of gods were really memories of visitors? The questions were designed to be impossible to ignore, and he delivered them with the same showman energy he had learned promoting events years earlier. The show became a genuine hit. Scientists dismissed it. Historians objected to it. But millions of people kept watching anyway, because the program was never really selling proof. It was selling wonder. It was selling the thrill of imagining that history might be hiding something. Tsoukalos understood that better than anyone, because selling an experience was the one skill he had been refining his entire adult life. He did not stop at appearing on the show. He helped shape it behind the camera as a producer, which meant he had influence over its direction, not just its content. He appeared in episode after episode, season after season, becoming the constant that viewers recognized instantly. The show expanded into other countries and spun off into related series. His face became shorthand for the entire genre, and this is the part that connects back to everything before it. He was not just a guy on a TV show. He was a promoter who had finally found the perfect product. The magazine gave him credibility within the community. The Von Däniken partnership gave him access. The television show gave him reach. Piece by piece, he was assembling something much larger than a media career. But the thing that truly launched him into the wider world was not something he planned, produced, or controlled. It came from strangers on the internet, and at first glance, it looked like the kind of attention that ends careers rather than builds them. The meme that changed everything. In late 2010, users on the website 4chan noticed something about Giorgio Tsoukalos. It was not really his theories that grabbed them. It was the combination of his dramatic hair and his absolute certainty. They took a freeze frame of him from the show and paired it with a caption that mocked how he seemed to credit anything mysterious to aliens. The phrasing suggested he was saying it was aliens while pretending not to say it. He never actually said those exact words. The meme put a phrase in his mouth that was never really his. It did not matter at all. The image was too perfect, and it spread with stunning speed. It jumped off 4chan and onto Reddit, then onto Facebook, then onto every other platform people were using at the time. The early 20s were the perfect moment for it. The internet was hungry for this exact kind of ironic, reusable joke, and his face fit the format flawlessly. People used it for everything: lost keys, strange history, and unexplained events of any kind. The meme stopped being about ancient astronauts and became a universal symbol for over-the-top explanations. And the numbers tell you it never really faded. Even years later, that template still ranks near the top of the most searched meme formats in the country. Most internet jokes burn bright and disappear. His did not. It became part of the permanent furniture of the internet. And that kind of staying power is something money genuinely cannot buy. Now, think about the situation he was in. Before the meme, a relatively small audience knew him from a cable show. After the meme, millions of people who had never watched a single episode knew his face on sight. Most people, suddenly turned into a global punchline, would have been humiliated. They would have gone quiet, or gotten defensive, or tried to fight it. He did the opposite. And this is the decision that genuinely changed his life. He embraced it completely. In a widely read online question and answer session, he called the attention a great honor and said he had the best fans in the world. When he was asked about his hair, he openly admitted it was styled with plenty of hairspray. He was not the target of the joke, standing outside of it. He climbed inside the joke and made himself comfortable there. It was the smartest move available to him, and it is the move almost nobody else in his position ever makes. And I think this is the moment to be honest about what was really happening, because it is easy to miss. The meme was not damaging his brand. It was built for free. Every time someone shared that image to laugh at him, they were also spreading his face, his name, and his entire concept to people who had never encountered it. The internet thought it was mocking him. From a promoter's point of view, the internet was running his marketing campaign at no cost. He never had to spend $1, and the reach kept growing. The proof shows up in the most concrete way possible, which is money. In the years around the meme's peak and the seasons that followed, his estimated wealth did not just grow. It multiplied several times over. The exact figures are always rough, but the direction is not in doubt. The mockery and the income rose together. That is not a coincidence. That is a man who understood that attention, Even laughing attention is still attention. And attention is the raw material every promoter turns into something valuable. He had the show. He had the meme. He had a face the whole world recognized. The only question left was what a true promoter does when he finally has that much attention in his hands. The answer is that he stops giving it away on a screen and starts charging admission for it in person. The live shows and the money. Once Giorgio Tsoukalos had global recognition, he did exactly what his bodybuilding background had trained him to do. He took the attention off the screen and turned it into live events, the kind of events that people buy tickets to attend. This is the part of his story that gets almost no coverage, and it is the part where the real money quietly lives. The clearest example is the conventional world. For years, there have been large gatherings built around the ancient alien subject, and these are not small meetups. At their peak, these conventions have drawn crowds in the tens of thousands. Fans show up, sometimes in costume, to hear the speakers, meet the personalities, and feel like part of something. If you remember the bodybuilding shows from earlier in his life, this should feel familiar. It is the same structure. There is a crowd, a stage, a lineup of recognizable names, and an experience you can only get by being there. Then came the touring stage show. Instead of waiting for fans to come to one big convention, he took the production on the road and brought it to theaters across the country. He shares the stage with other figures from the field, and together they spend the evening telling stories and taking questions. The shows are carefully planned and often booked into cities that big tours usually skip, which means he is reaching audiences who rarely get events like this anywhere nearby. Look closely at how the tickets are structured, because this is the bodybuilding promoter showing through again. Entry tickets start at a fairly accessible price, low enough that a curious person can easily justify it. Then there are the upgrades. Fans can pay more for a photo experience after the show, a chance to stand next to him and capture the moment. There is reportedly a firm rule against autographs, a rule that came about after the lines became too difficult to manage. So the value gets concentrated into the photo instead. That is deliberate design. That is someone who has spent decades thinking carefully about how crowds move and how experiences are priced. He did not stop at live shows either. He has offered guided trips to remote ancient sites, the kind of places his theories revolve around, so that fans can visit them alongside him. He sells personalized video messages online. He released a signed figurine of himself that costs hundreds of dollars. Every single one of these is the same idea wearing a different outfit. He takes the recognition, packages it carefully, and lets people pay to get closer to it. This is why we keep coming back to the promoter angle, because once you see it, you simply cannot unsee it. The standard story says he is a believer who became a television personality, but that version completely misses how the money actually works. The television show gives him reach and keeps his face familiar. The reach feeds the conventions. The conventions feed the tour. The tour feeds everything else. It is a connected system, and he has been quietly running it for years while most people still picture him as just the meme guy frozen in a screenshot. And whether or not you believe a single word of his theories, and plenty of people genuinely do not, you have to admit that the construction of it is impressive. He found a subject, learned the machinery of spectacle somewhere completely unrelated, and then bolted the two things together into a career that has lasted far longer than anyone ever expected. But a career this visible does not get built in peace. For every fan filling those theater seats, there has been a critic on the other side, and one critic in particular has been following him, documenting him, and refusing to let go since long before the cameras ever found him. The critics who never let go. For as long as Giorgio Tsoukalos has been a public figure, scientists and historians have pushed back against him hard. Archaeologists have called the ideas baseless. Major publications have run blistering takedowns of the show. The most common criticism is that the theories overwhelm viewers with a flood of questions and unusual details, never slowing down long enough for any single claim to be properly examined. There is also a deeper objection, and it is one worth taking seriously. Many scholars argue that the ancient astronaut idea, intentionally or not, takes credit away from ancient peoples. When the theory suggests that the builders of great monuments in Egypt, in the Americas, in Africa, and in the Andes needed outside help, critics point out that European achievements almost never get questioned in the same way. That pattern troubles a lot of historians, and it is a serious charge that sits quietly underneath the entertainment. Tsoukalos has an answer that he returns to again and again. He argues that the harder people attack his ideas, the more it proves he is onto something real. In his view, nobody bothers to fight something that does not threaten them. It is a clever rhetorical move, because it turns every piece of criticism into evidence in his favor. Whether that is good logic is for you to decide, but it has clearly worked for him for a very long time, and it lets him absorb almost any attack without flinching. The most fascinating part of the criticism story is one specific person. Back when Tsoukalos was still mostly a bodybuilding promoter, a young journalism student interviewed him for a school project. When the student pushed back on some of the claims, the friendly mood reportedly vanished, and the conversation turned tense very quickly. According to the student's own account, Tsoukalos pointed out that he had been interviewed by major networks and never once challenged, then asked why a mere student thought he could do so. That student did not walk away. He grew up to be one of the most dedicated researchers tracking this entire field, and he has spent years carefully documenting and fact-checking the claims. The relationship between the two men stayed sour for a long time. According to the account that has been made public, when the early version of the famous television show was being made, the producers wanted skeptics to play the role of opponents. The student's name ended up on screen, sliding past with dramatic music, cast almost like a villain in the story. He later said he was not sure whether to feel humiliated or honored, and eventually decided on honored. These details are genuinely revealing because it shows how the whole machine handles disagreement. Critics are not ignored, and they are not silenced either. They are absorbed into the show as characters. The opposition becomes part of the entertainment itself, which only makes the entertainment bigger and the audience more invested. Even now, the pushback continues at the highest levels. A world-famous Egyptologist recently appeared on a massive podcast and dismantled the alien building claims directly, saying that decades of excavation have turned up only evidence of human work and nothing else. Tsoukalos, as always, was completely unmoved. He has called himself a renegade, someone standing outside the careful structure that mainstream experts have built, and he shows no sign at all of stepping back inside it. So when you ask what really happened to the ancient aliens guy, here is the honest answer. Nothing stopped him. The mockery did not stop him. The scientists did not stop him. The relentless critics did not stop him either. He took a childhood book, a promoter's skill set, a lucky meme, and a flat refusal to ever back down. And he turned all of it into something genuinely durable. You do not have to believe a word he says to recognize what he actually is. He is not a man the internet defeated. He is a man the internet accidentally funded. So what do you think? Was he a true believer who got lucky, or a brilliant promoter who played all of us? Drop your honest take in the comments because we genuinely want to hear it.